The Kent Lapp Podcast.
She passed the Bible.
Gospel. You want to? I don't want to. I'm going to maybe somewhat slightly change the topic. So let's dig into what you've got there, Rachel. I just want to talk about gospel safety time because I think that's that's important.
Yeah, actually, that's something we totally jacked from your church.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we have T-shirts.
No way.
We printed gospel safety time T-shirts.
Oh,
Half
cool.
our church is wearing this stinking T-shirt on Sunday morning.
No way.
Yeah, we get.
Oh, that's cool. The church, or it's you guys? Like it's part of Control Freak, or it's the church?
No. I hate Conformity, so I'm too much of a hipster to actually wear the shirt.
Okay.
But yes, the church, most of the people in the church have the gospel safety time
Oh,
T-shirts.
very cool.
Our
Yes.
pastor's preaching it all the time.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
huge for us.
Well, I think
yeah.
that came from Ray, so it's not
Yes.
like
Yeah, and Tony was here, so
Oh, it's totally
Yeah,
it was not trademarked, right, Mason? As far as we know.
I hope not, because we're printing T-shirts right now.
He put it out on not together for the Gospel Coalition. I mean, there's a video of it.
Ray has a video on the Gospel
He wants
Coalition.
it out there everywhere, just like
Yeah,
culture.
yeah. Well, it's just like truth. I mean, it's not supposed to be trademarked, right? So gospel safety time. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were actually driving on the way over and listening to the audio Bible, and this verse just really stuck out to me. It's 1 Corinthians 4:6, and it says, I have applied all these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, brothers, that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up in favor of one against another. And I think that really just sums up the problem with the authoritarian fundamentalist attitude is, well, the Bible may not say this, but it's the wise thing to do.
Yes.
And therefore I feel better than you. We're the enlightened ones.
Yes, exactly. But also in that book is verses about people who use their authority to like damage little children, basically. And that's probably not just talking about 0 to 12-year-olds, you know what I mean? Like this could be a 30-year-old child in the faith, if you will, and how it'd be better for them to have basically a few concrete blocks tied around their feet and dropped into the ocean.
Yeah.
So are they not reading those verses, or do they not think they are doing that?
Well, all you have to do is define everyone else as a bad guy and you as a good guy, and you're set. That's all you gotta do.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's just about somebody else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's that simple.
Yep.
And it's that common.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all it is.
All right, so with your experiences and now with being kind of in this space, what are triggers? Like what are warning signs that you would notice?
Conformity, like unity is one thing. Unity is where we have Jesus in common, and it's such a big deal that it dwarfs things like old earth versus new, young earth creationists, or it dwarfs things like political views. Like because Jesus is such a big deal. That's unity. And you can have different tastes. You can have different clothing styles. You can have your speech patterns can be wildly different. You can do a lot of things, but have Jesus in common. But conformity is we have to look alike. So a lot of the homeschooling circles, they would go through these phases of prairie dresses, or then a more elegant version. You would know better than me. So they would go through these different phases of different styles of clothing, especially the women. I grew up with camo pants because I was that homeschool kid.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, but like because conformity is important. And you have to look the same because there's not confidence in the unity we have in Jesus. We have to look the same to feel like we're together.
So for you, that's how you're defining conformity is the looking. So I'm hearing you put kind of an emphasis on the looking,
the aesthetic
part,
yes,
the aesthetics,
yeah.
what we wear, how we dress, that type of a thing.
How we sound. Sure.
Okay, so it's going to go beyond that. It's our vocabulary, it's the books we're reading, it's all of those things.
Even
So
theology.
conformity. Okay.
Yeah, because Rachel, I'm just going to out you here.
Yeah, go ahead.
You grew up with like a theonomic Reconstructionist view of the world. And so,
What's that?
It's okay. So Reconstructionism is like the umbrella,
Okay.
and underneath it were about 5 different beliefs. So you would call yourself a Reconstructionist if you believe these 5 things. And they were Calvinism, postmillennialism, that's eschatology, presuppositional apologetics, theonomy was one, and then
What's the fifth one?
covenantalism. So having a covenantal perspective on the Bible as opposed to dispensationalism.
And what's theonomy? What does that
So
mean?
yeah, theonomy was definitely the most extreme of those that I just mentioned. And theonomy was the idea that, well, theonomy is a compilation of two Greek words, theo and nomos, God and law. So it's basically God's law, which we all would agree with on the surface. You know, God's law is a good thing. But
I
the
vote
way
yes.
that they but the way that they took that was that unless the New Testament, and this came out of their covenantal perspective, that anything from the Old Testament is going to come across into the New Testament unless it's specifically repealed in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they have made the argument that because God's law, the civil law in the Old Testament given to Israel was moral, it carried over. So we should still execute homosexuals. And it got very extreme.
Oh, wow.
Now, I will say that actually some of the biggest supporters of our podcast are Reconstructionists, Theonimus. But there is a subsegment which really take abuse seriously and things like that. So I just want to say that because we have some dear friends that would still be in those circles that will say, well, that's the maximum penalty that could be applied in certain cases, you know, but it doesn't necessarily mean execute everybody.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
There's a lot of degrees within.
yeah. So I feel
Okay.
like, you know, a lot of people who are just being introduced to it are going to go, you know, to this idea are going to freak out,
Yeah.
rightfully so, because it's been used in some very dangerous ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are some, again, very faithful Christians that I wouldn't even really consider that fundamentalist, but they do hold to some of this theology. So
Okay.
I want to put that, I think that caveat's important because I don't want
Yeah.
to paint with too broad of a brush.
Well, what's
here.
interesting is you were kind of going through those points. I mean, I'm Calvinist. I'm covenantal. I mean, there's a few things there. I'm like, oh, I'm like Reconstructionist. I don't know. When did this term come about? Where did Reconstruction? What's that?
Rushdoony.
R.J. Rushdoony was a guy, I think his works became popular in the 80s. So this
Okay.
movement really grew a lot in the 80s and 90s. Greg Bonson, you may be familiar with him. He was a Christian apologist. He was a Reconstructionist. There were a lot of people. A lot of it was connected to some religious right political stuff as well.
Including Vision Forum, they were very politically connected as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with the religious right.
Still are?
Well, Vision Forum fell apart. Doug Phillips fell into sexual sin, starting with a minor, and then she got older. So, I mean, we're talking some very evil things here. And so the organization has mostly fallen apart. They still technically exist.
Yeah, but what's interesting is when they fell apart, I kind of started to move on in the years following and felt like, oh, everybody else must be too. And since our podcast and since being able to be, you know, connected with a lot of people who are coming out of the movement, we've realized this is actually still thriving. Like,
Reconstruction?
well,
Or
More of the stay-at-home daughter
Okay.
pieces of it, yeah. But
Yeah.
Reconstructionism is often in there.
mhm.
And again, like I'm not going to push somebody out for being Reconstructionist. In fact, I have some friends that I really value that are Reconstructionists.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're definitely taking that Reconstruction in a different way, I would say, than the original Reconstructionism
Yeah.
did.
Okay.
It's morphed.
So gospel safety time. So at Emmanuel, it's very easy to get thrown out of the church with one caveat, and that is you are like attacking or abusing other people. If you're not doing that, it's very hard to get thrown out of the church. What you say, Mason?
Yeah.
I mean, it's if you're dealing with a sin yourself
Yeah.
and those types of things, I mean, this is what the church is here for, right? Like this is, you know, come on, we're all sinners and we help each other through this. But if you're coming in looking to take advantage, looking to, you know, damage someone's safety or those types of things, we have a very short leash for those types of things.
Same for our church. Yeah, same for our church. Because the way that Miguel puts it is you don't have the safety to take somebody else's safety.
Yeah, that's put very well.
Yeah.
So this is kind of coming back around to like, what are the warning flags? Like, so you mentioned, you know, conformity, over conformity maybe is like a trigger that, that could be a danger.
Right.
It could be dangerous.
Yeah.
What are some of the others?
I would say a lack of transparency about your own sin is a big one.
Mm.
Because in the cultures that I grew up in, Vision Forum and all that stuff, it was definitely, there was a very heavy emphasis on acting like you had your, stuff together. Like I'm a good Christian. I'm very mature. I'm not going to tell you about sin. I'll say I'm a sinner because we're reformed.
Right.
But I'm not going to say specifically I'm struggling with this week, right?
Yep.
Because now I've dropped a couple rungs on the spiritual ladder.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that is a huge one. I also think there's like if what the leader says just goes, I think that's a huge issue.
Yeah.
So my church is congregational.
Okay.
Which means that the final authority in the church is actually with the members of the church. So we could fire our pastors, I guess, but we have amazing pastors, so don't want to do that. Technically, we could, and that was the one piece I was super skeptical of when I showed up in Virginia. It's like, I know they're good people, but I don't know about this congregationalism piece. Like, it just sounds like a New England town meeting where you're, arguing things out, and whoever gets the majority wins. It's a stupid popularity contest with terrible politics. Unfortunately, what we've experienced has been very, very different than that, where the leaders lead, and yet there's an accountability to the congregation.
Mm.
So I, as a member of the church, am responsible for what is preached on a Sunday. If it's evil enough, I am responsible because I have the authority. To make sure that what comes out of that pulpit is not contrary to the gospel and contrary to Christ.
Yep.
I'm responsible for my brother who hasn't shown up in 3 weeks. And I remember the last time that happened, I had a church discipline them because they fell into sin, and that was me, and I had to do it, and I was responsible for that. And so I really like that model of church polity because it's much more open than most, and it gives people that just would be just showing up to church. So I'm like, oh, this is happening here. So there's a little less fantasy of how awesome our church is because we've been the sins are open enough that we can realize, man, we really just need God's grace here.
Yeah. Do you have elders?
We have elders.
Okay, so it's an elder-led congregational church.
Yeah, so we would say elder-led congregation rule.
Okay,
Gotcha. Is the way we would put that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like, back to warning signs, I feel like you can get a pretty good read on someone pretty quickly by looking in their eyes. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Like they say the eyes are the windows to the soul. And I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago where there was a neuroscience talking on someone's podcast, and he was actually saying that your eyes aren't connected to your brain. Your eyes are actually part of your brain. They're the only part of your brain that's not like within your skull. And so after hearing that, I'm like, yeah, interesting. I don't know if he's right or wrong, but he was a neuroscience. But I do feel like, the eyes are the window to the soul.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like when you're there have been a few people, in my, 13, 14 years of marriage and, 10 years of having kids, where I'm going to pay a little extra attention, and I'm going to keep some space between me and you because of the look in your eye.
That's so important.
And I'm not, look, I do not like judgy people. Please hear me on this. Like, I do not, giving people the benefit of the doubt is very important to me. I think it's how you should approach the world. I think it's how you should approach other people. I know we all have a sin nature, but look, giving people the benefit of the doubt I just think that's key. I mean, that's just a good way to go about things. Not be naive, but this is interesting because you guys might be hearing me talking about, dude, I don't know what you're saying about giving people the benefit of the doubt. That sounds crazy. You know what I mean? Like, your upbringing is different than mine. So maybe we have a different view on that. However, that's kind of neither here nor there, but like, I just feel like you can get a pretty good read on someone in a 3-minute conversation. Even like, are they looking at you?
Yeah.
Where are they looking? What is the looking? I feel like you can really get a read on someone relatively quickly.
Well, different people have different levels of discernment, and I tend to trust my gut a lot. It's actually been super helpful for me. I think you tend to be the same way. That intuition just seems to be spot on. I think it's a gift from God, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, yeah, let's use the gifts God's given us. And if you've got a good intuition or a good gut about people, then yeah, use it. That's great.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of times in Christianity, the idea of grace means we ignore all the warning signs and we let the monster molest our children.
Yes.
You know, and that's a really horrible misuse of grace.
Yep.
And so that's monstrous. That's horrible.
Yes.
And it's such a neglect of our responsibilities. But some people really just don't have any discernment.
Yeah.
You know, and we are all given gifts to different abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And my own discernment has missed on people.
Mm-hmm.
I've missed the mark. There's people I didn't trust that turned out to be very trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's people I did trust that turned out to not be trustworthy.
Yeah.
So it's not a 100% thing. But yeah, you know, I think if you get a creepy vibe, you should pay attention to that because God's given you that kind of ability to feel a creepy vibe and try to figure things out from there.
Agreed. And narcissism, I think, is, I don't know if that goes without saying, but that's a huge red flag.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's super consumed with themselves, it's like, dude, I don't know what you're trying to do. I just lose interest super quick.
I think it's so hard, though, because, I mean, you're absolutely right. But I think it's super hard because so much of evangelicalism is actually led by narcissists. Like, you don't have to go very far back in history. I mean, look at the people who have fallen that we would consider good, conservative, gospel preaching brothers. You know, there was the Paige Peterson thing, but bigger names than that. Like, think of Mark Driscoll, think of James White, think of who are some other? I mean, Doug Phillips was one. Bill Gothard was one. I mean, these are people that have touched millions of lives. Yeah. Just the names I've mentioned. And I know I could come up with more.
Yep.
So,
but you're proving my point, though, because they were narcissistic.
They were narcissistic.
You know what I mean?
But I don't think people know how to recognize a narcissist.
Yeah. You mean when it's actually happening?
When it's actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Because if the people you look up to end up acting in these, and to varying degrees, the men I mentioned, there's varying degrees of what went wrong.
Yes. And the other thing that's difficult with the narcissism thing too is like you would maybe pick up on that very quickly if you worked for them, and you would have no clue if you were just listening to, say, a Mark Driscoll sermon across a podcast. You know, which I don't know a lot of those other names that you mentioned. But the Driscoll thing, I mean, I haven't kept up much. I hope there's some redemption there because he's in Phoenix now starting another church. And so giving people the benefit of the doubt, has he learned some lessons and changed? I don't know. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. I guess hopefully for all those guys.
He was really influential for me. I was listening to him when I was in the Navy.
Really?
Yeah. And I listened to him and Paul Washer.
Which are two
very different voices.
Yeah.
Apparently, I just like to be yelled at.
Yeah.
And they both, I'm really grateful. They both kind of kept me from the dangers of the other. The Lord was gracious. And then when I was able to be a part of a local church, I just kind of, tied in there and listened a lot less. But yeah, very grateful actually for a lot of his ministry. Very helpful.
Same.